Meatpacking firms like to say that they will, anybody that wants to work in a meatpacking firm can, but the communities that they relocated in were largely areas that had low unemployment, and the meatpacking firms were large, employing thousands of workers. And so very quickly the meatpacking firms used up all the available workers in the area, and so they began recruiting farther and farther afield. When the meatpacking firms came to Southwest Kansas in the early 1980s, there was also a farm crisis at that time. There was high unemployment in certain areas, and so they attracted significant numbers of workers, and they came, as I said earlier, largely from Latin America, mainly Mexico, but other areas as well, and also refugees who had come into Kansas. Many of them had, first wave of Vietnamese had relocated in Wichita, had been sponsored by people in Wichita. Second wave Vietnamese began fleeing Southeast Asia, so-called boat people, in the late 1970s, and so they also began coming. The meatpacking, to work on the line in a meatpacking plant, you don't have to have a high school diploma. You don't have to have any pre-existing job skills. You don't have to speak English. And but the jobs pay relatively well. They certainly pay significantly more than minimum wage. Today, if you were starting at a plant, $13 an hour would be sort of an average wage. That sounds great. It is significantly better than almost any job that you can find if you don't have a high school diploma, if you don't have pre-existing job skills, if you don't speak English. And so that has attracted immigrants and refugees. Meatpacking firms like immigrants and refugees because they see them as hard workers. They are often vulnerable. They may be here without authorization. Even if they're refugees, they may not know their rights, and so they are a more docile workforce. Packers like to bring in a lot of people from different backgrounds because they see that as being less likely to organize. So if you're making about $13 an hour, let me back up for a second. 90% of people working in a meatpacking plant are working on the line. That means they work in slaughter or processing or some other hourly wage. 10% of the workers are salaried. Those workers tend to be white men. The people working in the office, accountants and other office staff, tend to be white women. They may be spouses of the management, or they may be locals. But most of the workers on the floor, on the line, are people of color, and most of those are immigrants and refugees. About 2/3 of workers in packing houses are men, about a third, between a quarter and a third are women. And so if you're working on the line, and if you're starting out at $13 an hour, that means you'll make a little over $500 a week before taxes, before withholding, about $27,000 a year. That's only about $3,000 above the federal poverty line, and it puts you well below eligibility for your children to get free or reduced price lunches in public schools. So packing houses really employ what is often called the working poor. They're good jobs relative to many other jobs. The other kinds of jobs that spin off from packing houses are largely service sector jobs. They may be in trucking, they may be in retail, fast food. And so packers like to say that they will create lots of jobs in the communities where they relocate. They do. But many of those jobs, really most of those jobs, are people who were not there when the plant was built. They attract people coming from elsewhere to find work. And those people usually are can't find work elsewhere. It's not the kind of job that most people aspire to. And so they will draw in people who are already poor, and they will, those jobs will create jobs that are low, that are modest paying, and often require people in other social services within the community, such as food banks, free and reduced price lunches, and so forth.